I don't know if I handled my son's first gay moment correctly. You gotta nip it in the bud. Hey, stop! That's gay!
When it happened, you know, my first thought is I'm gonna ignore it. I'm gonna ignore it because it's 10 years old. This is stuff I've addressed. I've talked about this. This isn't new. I've addressed it. I've apologized for it. I'm not gonna pay it any mind. Because when you feed into that stuff, you only add more fuel to the fire.
Right.
If you don't believe that people change, grow, evolve as they get older, I don't know what to tell you. If you want to hold people in a position where they always have to justify or explain their past, then do you. I'm the wrong guy, man. I'm in a great place, a great mature place, where all I do is spread positivity. If you're not doing that, you're not on my page.
Okay, so when given an opportunity to apologize again, Kevin said he wouldn't, so no Oscars. For many, especially, for many in the gay community, but especially in the black community, okay, the Twitter apologies or explanations on Ellen have fallen flat. I'm sure you've seen what folks are saying. If you haven't, check it out. To many, they seem insincere and that he has somehow turned himself into a victim.
I don't like the forcing. I don't like Don Lemon goes on CNN and he's like, you can fix this, become an ally. That's not my life dream. Kevin Hart apologizes for his remarks that hurt members of the LGBTQ community. I apologize. I'm now moving on from this because I'm just hoping that the apology is accepted. If it's chosen not to be accepted, I can't control that. If your fight is for equality, then you need to understand that change is what helps that. You can't get what you want without understanding and accepting the change.
On some level, you can understand for him that it may feel like he's under attack, right? Because he's in the middle of it. But I will tell you, for me, as I relate to him, and I can talk about my part, he's not a victim.
Don Lemon says that Kevin Hart is not a victim for receiving enormous backlash against Hart's past comments concerning homosexuality and for people not accepting what he has said about apologizing for his past remarks. Hart says that he is basically done apologizing, that he just wants to move on from his past, and that it's not his dream to become an LGBTQ activist. But this simply isn't enough for people like Don Lemon, who is continuing to criticize and apply pressure to Hart.
So maybe he now knows just a little bit more of what that feels like. Even if it's misguided or however you feel about it, now he knows a little bit what that feels like. The LGBT community, which I am a part of, can and should hold people with large megaphones to account. Right? We should do that.
Why are people like Don Lemon unable and unwilling to accept Kevin Hart for who he is today? And why are they so insistent that Hart should become an LGBTQ activist rather than simply remain neutral on the subject? It's because they essentially consider anyone who is not fully on their side and actively celebrating their lifestyle an enemy of what they are fighting for. Enemies who must be targeted and called out.
That's what we're seeing today. We're seeing those who call good evil and who call evil good, who exchange light for darkness and bitter for sweet. But they even go beyond that, in that they are at war with those who call dark, dark, and light, light. Amen? They find it hugely problematic and attempt to shame and silence those who say what God says about sin.
Even though Hart isn't even saying that homosexuality is a sin, LGBTQ activists like Don Lemon still find it
hugely problematic
that Hart refuses to give a groveling apology for his negative remarks towards homosexuality, and they find it
hugely problematic.
that he is unwilling to actively join the LGBTQ movement as an ally. There is a desperation within this movement to legitimize and celebrate LGBTQ behavior in every aspect of society. So it's important to have the culture not just passively accept them for who they are, but rather to actively be celebrating and fighting for the cause of the movement.
These people who are so driven to divest themselves of guilt, to release and free themselves from any assessment that they are sinning, are promoting and selling their perversion as if it's normal on every level in this nation, starting with elementary schools, TV sitcoms, films, and every other form of media. The government has stepped up to help fund their efforts and accommodated them in all kinds of ways with non-discriminatory laws. Politicians seek the homosexual vote by campaigning for homosexual rights. They want us to accept the notion that homosexual behavior is really something that is natural for a legitimate minority, that it's the same as being African American, or it's the same as being Hispanic.
This is the exact same mindset of the movement that says it's not enough to not be a racist, but rather you have to be anti-racist.
Ibram X. Kendi proposed an amendment to the Constitution, an anti-racist amendment to the Constitution. To fix the original sin of racism, Americans should pass an anti-racist amendment to the U.S. Constitution that enshrines two anti-racist principles. One, racial inequity is evidence of racist policy. And two, the different racial groups are equals. The amendment would make unconstitutional racial inequity over a certain threshold. Be unconstitutional if you have racial inequity. And again, equity is about outcomes, right? If you have outcomes that are disparate over a specific threshold, it would make it unconstitutional.
And that's the key right there. The similarity between the anti-racist movement and the LGBTQ movement. They want to label mindsets and behaviors that are not actually racist or homophobic as being racist or homophobic, simply because they don't go far enough in promoting complete equity between all groups of people. What this means is that what Don Lemon expects from Kevin Hart is on the level of a religion, a cult, where there are people who have been enlightened, and people who do not believe or do the right things must be called out and punished.
Many have said, and I have said, I call it the cult of anti-racism. It is a religion. It is a religion. They have their own doctrine, they have their own saints, they have their own canon. They have their own priests, theologians.
Don Lemon has assumed the position of priest in the LGBTQ movement, and he has decided that Kevin Hart remains unenlightened and therefore cannot be allowed to simply move on with his life without any consequences. He must continue applying pressure to Kevin Hart until Hart becomes the kind of member of his movement that he expects Hart to be. Now, if Don Lemon speaks and behaves in this manner towards Kevin Hart, who has said that he now respects and accepts people in the LGBTQ movement for who they are, imagine how Lemon would act towards Christians who refuse to compromise concerning calling homosexuality sin. Oh wait, we don't have to imagine that. We already know.
But if you believe in something that hurts another person, that does not give someone the same rights or freedoms, not necessarily under the Constitution, because this is under God, I think that that's wrong.
And there you have it. Don Lemon says that God does not judge people, while at the same time he is judging Christians to be wrong on the subject of gay marriage. And that is the great hypocrisy of Don Lemon and the LGBTQ movement. If you like this video, subscribe to help spread the truth.